Hello everyone. This video will be on the user interface of Maya. Now, before I even cover the UI here, just a few things I want to talk about before we get into the user interface. When you first open up Maya, there should be a pop-up window that opens. One may or may not come open, and I'm going to get to that one in a second, and the other one will open for everyone. It's just going to be little pop-up windows. Now the first one I'm talking about is if you've ever had a previous version of Maya installed on your computer before. If you have, it's going to ask you whether you'd like to import old settings or if you'd like to start this one with the factory default settings. Now I'm going to leave that up to you because I'm going to be showing this class on the default settings. Now, the other thing, the next pop-up window that opens will be a pop-up that says here's what's new in Maya, and then there's going to be a couple check boxes. One says would you like to keep the new items highlighted? I am keeping them highlighted. And the next one says do you want to show this at startup? And I uncheck that. So my software will open every time without any of these pop-up windows coming open, because I don't want them to, and I click the little checkbox. And it's just a faster way for me to open up the software and just get to work right away without having these annoying little pop-open windows distracting me. Now, that being said, let's get into the UI. So, this is what happens. Right when you open up Maya, this is what it looks like. And first things first, let's go all the way up to the top here where it says Autodesk Maya 2018 student version Untitled asterisk. So the Untitled, that's only because we haven't saved the file yet. Once we save it, this name will change. Now the next menu bar I would like to cover, and you obviously have your minimize, full screen, or close buttons up here. Now the next thing is our menu bar here. These will change depending on your tab, but the ones that you're used to seeing on any software probably is File or Edit. The rest of these are unique to each one of these tabs here, so I'm just going to scrub through them. I'm not going to get into fine detail what they are yet. As the semester goes on and we cover these tabs a little bit more in depth, we'll learn more about them as we go. So the first one's our modeling tab, and I'm just going to show you how these will change. Rigging, notice how these changed. If we go to animation, these changed, so on and so forth. FX, rendering, and I'm just going to go back to modeling. Now, from here we have our other bar here. We have some save scene, undo last action, redo the last undone action, open scene, and new scene. So those are pretty standard. This is basically undo, redo, save, open, and new. After that we have some other settings, and I don't think I want to confuse you just yet. Some of these buttons are going to get confusing. Some of them, as the semester goes on, you'll probably accidentally turn on, not realize what you did, and want to undo whatever you just did, and it won't work unless you know which settings you changed. When we get into it, because it's going to be a little bit over your head at the moment, we'll get into more detail what they are. So some of these they have hidden by default, and for good reason. We don't need to worry about any of these things yet. Now the next ones, these are really important and good to know when first learning. Primarily snapping to the grid. As you can see, we have a grid here. Come on, unhide, there we go. Snap to curves, we'll get into that. Snap to points, we'll get into that. Snap to projected center, we'll get to that in a moment, and I'll go back and cover all these in just a second. And you'll notice they're all little magnets. Okay, snap to view planes, make the selected object live. Now, no live surface, I don't have any items in my scene. Apparently you can just sign in also, and then we have a few other buttons over here. This we don't need to worry about at the moment. Now your buttons over here in the top right corner, these are some pretty important buttons. I'm going to cover what they are. So I'm going to leave this one and this one alone for the moment. This is our show hide attribute editor. So that's a very important one, our attribute editor. And I like to have channel attribute modeling kit. That's just my preference. Then here are tool settings. I'm going to show you that in the next video. And then here we have our channel box. So I can turn that off and turn it back on. And we don't have any channels yet or anything in. These are just blank because I don't have any objects in my scene yet. And then by default it has this modeling toolkit. I'll cover some of these things. Personally, I just go through the menu bar up here. You have all of your tools up here. They created this extra tab as a faster way to sort of model, but I'm going to show you the long way to get to these same tools, and when you get used to it that way, you can integrate the more quick way to select certain tools. But we're going to stay away from that for now. Okay, so the other few things that we have here, over here on our far left, we have a main menu bar, sort of, if you will. Sort of like it's like a sub-tool bar is what I'm going to call it. Now, it has our select tool, our lasso tool, our paint selection tool, which we won't need to worry about anytime soon. We have our, move tool, rotate tool, and scale tool. Now these three tools are very extremely important, and we're going to be using these tools all the time. And I'm going to cover those tools specifically in the next video. Now, a few other things. This is our viewport, our panel layout, if you will. So they already have a panel layout set up for us by default. So this is just one main window. Now if I click the one with the 4 tabs here, you'll see we have 4 different viewports. Now this is the top. It labels it top -y. So you see we have in our perspective viewport, x-axis, y-axis, z-axis. Now this perspective is just the perspective viewport, and we haven't even gone into navigating it yet. So that's going to be covered in the following video. This is our top, this is our front, or Z and X. Y, Z, X axes. Now, expanding off of that, we also can do some other custom layouts. In this particular instance, it has front or perspective. When the semester goes on, I will show you different saved layouts that we can utilize when we're modeling or texturing or anything like that. Primarily, one of them that we will be using is the UV, and we'll get to that soon, in a few weeks. So we also have our outliner. Now the outliner is really useful, especially when you have a lot of objects in your scene. When you're getting into a really complicated scene, the outliner is super useful. It has everything laid out for you. We have our certain things, obviously, we cannot change anything to. Our default light sets and our viewport cameras. And that's it. So, I'm going to go back over here to this single panel layout with the one viewport. And if you want to get rid of the outliner, you can just click on it and it'll stay there. It's just going to be in this little sidebar, and I'm going to keep it there for now. Now in my viewport, I'm just going to click once in here, where as you can see I'm highlighting, clicking, dragging. That's just to make sure I'm clicked in here. Press spacebar. You'll notice it's going to return to your previous panel layout. So, and if I want to go to my front, I'm going to toggle that. Now I'm in my front, and I'm just pressing spacebar once. I'm just tapping it. Now I'm going to go back to my perspective viewport. Now I'm going to go to this one, or my 4 viewport, and then my single viewport. And I'm going to show you now. If I press spacebar, just tap it. Ooh, it did not work. Let's try that one more time. Okay, so I'm in my 4 viewport here. Now I can, if I tap spacebar, I can toggle in and out of a larger viewport of that particular one just much more quickly. Okay, So that's just tapping spacebar. If you hold it, you'll get a whole bunch of things up that we don't really know anything about them yet. We'll get there. And if I just go ahead and tap in my perspective viewport, I'm back in there. One last thing I'm going to cover with you in this little learning the interface. Down here, we have our timeline. We will not get to this for a while, but we will. We're going to start building some things, and then later in the semester we'll start learning what the timeline does and how to animate in it. Here's our playback buttons. We'll get into that further detail later in the semester, and then we can sort of adjust our timeline to expand, zoom in, zoom out kind of thing. And 24 frames per second, or we can change it to any of these other different styles that we like. I keep mine at 24 for now, depending on the project. And then we have some of these buttons. If we can do continuous loop if we're having an animation we want to watch loop, so on and so forth. Auto key, I keep this off usually all the time. I normally never really use the auto key. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes, most of the time for me anyway, in my particular style, is not. And then animation preferences. We're not going to get into that yet. We'll cover that as we get into more of animating in Maya or in 3D software. So the last thing we have is inside the viewport we have a bunch of different little buttons in here. They're complicated. We'll get to those as the semester goes on. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information, but we have our view, our shading, our lighting, and renderer and panels, and we'll cover that later in the semester because it's just so much information to take in. I don't want to sort of distract you from our core points we need to get to. So that's just learning the interface. Stay tuned to the next video. I'm going to show you how to navigate through the viewport, and I'm also going to show you how to use some of our most basic but most important tools, the move, scale, and rotate tool. I hope you enjoyed.